Well, friends, I have very big news to share with you this morning. The Federal Reserve is going to make a huge announcement on inflation. Millions of Americans could finally begin to see financial relief starting next week. Congressional lawmakers, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, are proposing new bills that will change monthly benefits. So friends, please make sure you watch until the end of this video, especially if you receive monthly benefit checks. And to say thank you, friends, for joining me here every day and watching the videos I post, I'm giving away 4 $75 Walmart gift cards every week. Please make sure that you click and like several of my videos and then comment below the keyword of each video that you watch. The more videos that you leave a comment on, the greater your chances of winning the giveaways. During the months of October, November, and December, I will also be giving away surprise $200 gift cards to those of you that have been in this community for several months now. There is a reason so many consumers have been calling for stimulus checks this year. Inflation has been making it very difficult to keep up with the standard living costs, and many Americans feel they need a lifeline to avoid depleting their savings and racking up scores of credit card debt just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve has been hiking up interest rates in an attempt to slow the pace of inflation. And while its intentions in doing so are good, it has put a burden on consumers who have landed in a position where they need to borrow money in the form of credit card balances just to keep up with their basic expenses. Later this week, we should get a critical inflation reading that could determine whether the Fed pulls back on aggressive interest rate hikes or if they keep moving forward with them. In August, the rate of inflation notched upward slightly compared to July, and that sent the stock market reeling. It also prompted the Fed to implement another 0.75% interest rate hike during its most recent meeting. On October 13th, we can expect September data from the Consumer Price Index to be released. That index measures changes in the cost of consumer goods. If the CPI shows an uptick in inflation for September, there is a good chance that the Fed will respond with yet another aggressive rate hike. And that could make life even more difficult for cash-strapped consumers who are being forced to rely on credit cards these days. On the other hand, if the CPI shows that inflation levels were lower in September than in August, the Fed may not feel compelled to implement another harsh rate hike during its next meeting, and that could give borrowers a bit of relief. When borrowing becomes more expensive because interest rates are up, consumers tend to spend less. But the concern is that consumers could push back in the wake of much higher borrowing costs and cut their spending substantially. And if that happens, it could spur a recession and put some people in a position where their jobs and income are compromised. Friends, the key word for this video is pumpkin patch. If you would like to enter the next Walmart gift card giveaway, please click and like several of my videos and then comment below this keyword, which is pumpkin patch, and additional keywords of any video of mine that you watch. And friends, please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. Remember also that the more videos that you watch and leave the keyword on, the greater your chances of winning the giveaways. California began sending out about $9.5 billion to 23 million California residents this week. It is one of the largest inflation relief efforts coming from a number of U.S. states across the country. The middle-class tax refund checks in California will put up to $1,050 back into the pockets of Californians who qualify. The relief funding was issued to those with direct deposits starting October 7th, and others are scheduled to begin receiving their checks in the mail this week. Californians are not the only ones receiving a little extra cash. Taxpayers either already have or will soon receive relief payments ranging from $400 to $1,700 in the states of Georgia, Colorado, Delaware, Illinois, Indiana, Idaho, Minnesota, Maine, New Mexico, and South Carolina. While the goal is to offer support to Americans who are struggling with inflation and higher interest rates, some economists contend that handing out cash may make matters much worse by contributing to higher prices. Last year, the restaurant industry saw an immediate boost when the first round of stimulus checks began hitting Americans' bank accounts. After the first round of stimulus checks went out in December 2020, data shows that sales increased. But this year, a recent survey found 45% of consumers said they are eating out less, and a growing number say they are choosing less expensive options. Well, my beautiful friends, that is the end of my daily stimulus update video for this morning. Thank you so much for joining me here every day when I post a video. The winner of yesterday's Walmart gift card giveaway is Mary Young. Congratulations, my dear friend. To claim your gift card, please check your notifications page and send me an email. Or you can also send me a message on my Facebook page. Thank you, my friends, and have a wonderful and blessed day.
This morning, we received data that highlights once again the failure of the Biden administration to provide for our economy, to provide for the economic well-being of America. At home in Pennsylvania, I've heard stories of parents unable to afford back-to-school clothes and supplies for their children, and patients unable to afford the gas to put in their cars to drive to doctor's appointments. These problems are fruits from the same poisonous tree. Reckless government spending has sent prices skyrocketing across our economy. Instead of addressing this cause, liberals continue to double down by passing their so-called Inflation Reduction Act, while the Congressional Budget Office now reports that this act will increase our deficit through 2026. The fact is simple. President Biden has proven that he is unable to stop the runaway inflation that has raised the cost of housing, raised the cost of groceries, and continues to affect energy sources throughout America. The answer to this crisis will not be found in more government handouts. Now, more than ever, we need to stop the inflation that is crippling our economy and hurting Pennsylvania and all American families. Thank you. And I yield.
Since Democrats passed their $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan spending spree, the bill, I would add, that helped plunge our economy into our current inflation crisis. And 40% of Americans report having difficulty paying for their normal household expenses. Americans are dipping into their savings or working side jobs to make ends meet. They're charging more day-to-day expenses on their credit cards. And in too many cases, they're having to visit food banks, which are seeing huge lines thanks to continued high inflation. And what are Democrats and the president doing about this? Nothing. Of course, last month, Democrats did pass a bill they called the Inflation Reduction Act. The problem? The bill will do nothing to reduce inflation. Nothing. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. The nonpartisan Penn-Wharton budget model said that this about the bill's impact on inflation. And again, I quote, "The impact on inflation is statistically indistinguishable from zero." Statistically indistinguishable from zero. Or you could take the word of the Democrat chairman of the Budget Committee, who admitted right here on the Senate floor that the so-called Inflation Reduction Act would not reduce inflation. But it's not just that Democrats have done nothing to help solve our inflation crisis. They're also on track to make Americans' economic situation significantly worse. In August, President Biden announced a massive student loan giveaway that could cost anywhere from an estimated $500 billion to more than $1 trillion. And that from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget notes, and I quote, "meaningfully boost inflation." This is the statement from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget talking about the president's massive student loan giveaway, and they say it will, quote, "meaningfully boost inflation." Or as the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget recently put it, amid 40-year, and I quote again, amid 40-year high inflation, and despite the administration constantly touting its fiscal responsibility, these changes will recklessly add to the debt and make the Federal Reserve's job in fighting inflation even harder, which will amplify our risk of entering a recession, end quote. Now, many of us would argue we're already in a recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Inflation has spent 8 straight months at 40-year highs, and the President has decided that now is a good time to implement a policy that will, quote, meaningfully boost inflation. Mr. President, the economy continues to show signs of weakening, driven in large part by the inflation crisis Democrats helped create. Major companies have recently announced job cuts. 63% of small businesses are putting a hold on hiring, and 10% of those are cutting jobs. And we had economic growth, as I mentioned, for the past 2 quarters. And so naturally, Democrats decided this was a good time to raise taxes on businesses. Yes, Democrats' so-called Inflation Reduction Act imposes new taxes on businesses to help pay for their Green New Deal spending. I say taxes on businesses, but of course, taxes on businesses largely fall on workers and consumers in the form of fewer jobs and opportunities, lower wages, and higher prices. In other words, pretty much the exact opposite of what we need right now, with prices soaring and wages falling, or failing, I should say, to keep pace with inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act also imposes new taxes on energy that will drive up energy prices for both American families and American businesses, imposing further pain on family budgets and likely prolonging our inflation crisis even further. Mr. President, the President